watching Rogers TV.
Good evening and welcome to Addressing the Issue. I'm your host, Andy Streisfeld. I'm so excited to be able to provide this opportunity here on Rogers TV for a new and upcoming type of political show that is a public forum for people like you, citizens, experts, people who are in the know, who are able to give us insight into what we think are issues that are insurmountable. One of the concepts that we did when we designed this show was not to have politicians or parties represented because there's always some sort of spin. We want to be able to have a grassroots, honest conversation where we address the issue. So let's get to it. One of the things that's happened over the past few years is there's been an alarming decrease in voter participation. Voter apathy is what some people call it, voter suppression. But at the same time, why is this happening? Why is a proud country like Canada, who's had the tradition of going to the polls and making choices for the benefit of the good of the country, the province or the city, is suffering this type of situation? In 2014, Alex de Nonville did a research project and published a dissertation called Brantford City Councillors' Perceptions of Citizens' Participation. I really enjoyed the paper and I felt he would be our first guest in our first show, and he's with us live in Windsor. How are you there, Alex?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Andy. Thrilled to be here, thrilled to be your first guest. So congratulations on the new show.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So let's dive right into voter apathy. I had a great time reading the research paper and the project. And what I took away from it was that you were trying to understand the leaders' attitude, the people who actually serve us, the city councillors, the people in power, and understanding how they understood citizen participation in governance. What I also picked up was that participation is a matter of showing up, of actually being part of it. It's almost like you snooze or lose type of thing. If you have the empowerment, you need to do something with it. Did I get that right?
I think you got that right in terms of their perception of it. My paper argued, first of all, I have to say thank you for reading it. At least one person did. I think the paper argued for a broader conception of what participation means. So voters going to the poll every 4 years essentially is one part of the democratic process. There are all sorts of other ways that people can participate, that citizens can take more of an active role in local government. And I think the argument that I had in the paper was that elected representatives didn't necessarily see those opportunities. They saw more citizens participating beyond the ballot box as kind of a supplement to their role and not replacing their role or not giving them actual power in these processes. So I think you partially got it. I think the bigger picture, I would say, voting is one element of the broader political participation.
All right. So can you walk us through and talk to us about voting as the bigger picture or participation in the bigger picture of democracy?
Yeah, absolutely. So voter numbers are down, turnout's down, especially at the municipal level across the board. But there are other measures that kind of signal a decline beyond just voting. there's issues with trust. There are citizens generally have less trust in both elected leaders and their institutions like local governments. So they don't necessarily think that local governments are acting on their behalf or acting for them. There's elements of confidence similar to the trust, distrust. I think especially on the voting front, there are issues of representation. So there's really good research out there. I think it's what's the name of it? It's the Ontario. It's basically like a municipal democracy index. So it's looking at measuring larger cities in Ontario and how they stack up against one another in terms of this index of democracy. Some of the elements of that are, the makeup of council. So largely, councils are largely made up of men. Women are underrepresented compared to the broader population. Black, Indigenous, people of color are underrepresented compared to the general population. So I think there's a question of people not necessarily seeing themselves in the representatives or the candidates that are running for politics. I think that can drive low voter turnout as well. I know there are other elements. There are reports on the number of acclamations in Ontario this year. So that is the number of people that are running for seats uncontested, so they don't have to run elections. That tends to, when there aren't competitive races, that tends to drive voter turnout down. So I think it's voter turnout is one signal, but there are other signals that are indicating that there's kind of a bigger problem.
All right, so let's talk about the signals. Traditionally, voter apathy has been tied to either government suppressing the vote, therefore people don't want to vote. The media has been accused of being a key problem in voter apathy, and also education. People feel that they don't have the information, they don't have the wherewithal to do it. Are these viable, justifiable arguments, and do you see that as part of the voter apathy that we're seeing today in Canada?
Certainly, I think there are elements. Those all are elements of the bigger picture. Certainly, I don't see local governments in particular looking to suppress the vote. I think there are questions of making voting more accessible, which need to be asked. But it's definitely a bigger picture. So I think it's tough to nail down. This is one thing that's driving voter apathy. I think it's part of a constellation of issues that are contributing to this the trend of lower participation in voting and participation beyond voting. So there are other elements of participation that I've touched on in my paper that I've experienced in my career as well.
Perfect. What I really enjoyed about the paper was that it was down to earth. You interviewed the politicians anonymously, so there was no way to know who's who or who said what. But the overarching feeling was that there was a general concern from their point of view of citizen participation. Not to the point of that they feared it, but it was more of they were crafting or they wanted like-minded people. Do you think that that's actually reasonable? Or in your paper, was there some more extrapolation of that point?
I think they are aware of it as an issue. I think they see, in my experience, politicians see kind of the fallout of a lack of participation. I think it can really boil down to questions of legitimacy. So if there's a council that's elected with 20% of the vote, that means 80% of people, eligible voters, did not vote in that election. So those people may have questions about, is this a legitimate process? I think that it leads to bigger questions of what needs to be done, what can we do to increase voter turnout, but also increase participation kind of across the board.
All right, Alex, I want to work on that afterwards. Let's take a commercial break. We'll be back here with Alex and myself on addressing the issue.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Calling all journalism students, Omni Television is once again awarding scholarships to qualified students pursuing a career in third language journalism.
I would really like to thank Omni for this opportunity. And as a Brazilian student, this has been incredible for me because I have really learned so much.
Omni is home to a variety of locally produced current affairs programs and daily national newscasts, broadcast in 6 languages. To learn more about Omni scholarships, visit omnitv.ca/scholarships.
It was our 35th anniversary. To celebrate, we were on our way to Mama Rosie's, where we had our first date. That's when we heard coming from the radio. So we stopped and listened. It helped us get to safety. So when I think of I think of our anniversary because now we have even more to celebrate.
For frank discussion on Canadian politics and issues that matter to you, tune in to Addressing the Issue with Andy Streisfeld, Fridays at 6:30 on Rogers TV.
Enjoy watching the best of the best in disc golf. This Victoria Day weekend is the 4th annual Foxwood Open Disc Golf Tournament. The Foxwood Open is a PDGA A-tier tournament and a qualifying event for the United States Disc Golf Championship and the Throw Pink Women's Disc Golf Championship. Spectators can watch at the Foxwood Golf and Country Club, 277 Erbs Road in Baden. Visit foxwoodopen.com.
Welcome back to Addressing the Issue. I'm here with my guest, Alex de Donville. He's on Zoom here from Windsor. Can you talk more about the inequality of participation in local government? It was a key point in the research project, and it was very interesting ideas that were brought forward, and I'd love the listeners or the viewers to know about it.
Yeah, so in the previous segment, I talked about inequality of representation. So councils, especially at the municipal level, they don't tend to be necessarily reflective of the general population. So you have fewer women serving on council, you have fewer Black, Indigenous, people of color serving on council. Those are the measures that are known. I haven't seen a lot of research around, employment type or income levels, but I would assume councils tend towards people that have more money or are personally wealthy, just something that I've experienced in my career. So voting turnout tends to be lower amongst neighborhoods, communities with a lower socioeconomic status. So that's kind of one of the inequalities of voting. But there's also inequalities around, there's research in the United States around service requests. So they did research on the number of service requests made by neighborhoods, and they found that service requests were more common amongst richer neighborhoods. So there can be a kind of a feedback loop where poorer neighborhoods aren't requesting the services, so they don't receive the services. There's also research around, public meetings. I was talking about, participation as kind of a broader field. Public meetings are a huge one, especially when it comes to planning matters. Legislation in Ontario dictates you have to have a public meeting. Having a public meeting at certain times can exclude people. So you tend to not have a accurate representation of the population attending these meetings. There was, again, more research in the States. It found it was largely older white males that were attending meetings related to land use planning. And these meetings are opportunities for citizens to come and say, voice their opinion about a specific matter. If the people that are responding or the people that are attending these meetings are not representative, I think there are some questions that need to be asked around how do we bridge that gap? So how can we make these meetings more representative, and how can we remove some of the barriers that are faced by people that want to participate? I was talking about service requests before. I think it's thinking about participation beyond voting. We need to think of kind of the two elements. What can the organization do? What can the local government do to be aware of the barriers that people face? But what can individuals do to kind of have a better idea of how to participate, what makes effective participation, and being knowledgeable? So you kind of already touched on that before, but there are a number of elements. I like to think of it as kind of twofold effort. What can the organization do, and what can individuals do to be more effective or participate more effectively?
All right, so Alex, what do we do about it?
I'm glad you asked. I think there are a lot of possibilities. I was talking about the Ontario, the Municipal Democracy Index. So they basically looked at, they're kind of assessing each municipality, comparing each municipality. I think one of the things that they suggested or used as part of the index was participatory budgeting. So in the municipal world, the budget this is the document that's going to guide what a municipality does over the next year. So participatory budgeting gives citizens the opportunity to participate in a budget exercise. So I think, going back to my paper, it's giving citizens actual power. So there's instances where it's neighborhood associations or neighborhood groups that are kind of deliberating on how this money should be spent, how a participatory budgeting budget line, how it should be spent in their neighborhood. I think that's one element. But I think another element is that it's kind of giving people some insight into the process, giving them some education, some training, some experience about what it's like to go through the budgeting process. Municipal councillors, their jobs are not easy. It's incredibly difficult. There's a myriad of things that municipalities do. I don't envy them for the amount of work that they have to do. And I think giving people some insight into kind of the complexity, giving them the ability to kind of understand all of the moving parts, all the considerations that need to be made when making budget decisions is a good start. I've also done some research on civic academies. So citizen academies, we were talking about knowledge. How do municipalities work? How do these decision-making processes work? How does council work? Citizen academies give people kind of that extended look, some education on how our municipal organizations, how local governments actually operate. And I think the research from the United States has shown that participants in these citizen academies, they go on to participate in committees, and they may go on to run as elected leaders. So I think that's one of the solutions is kind of giving people more opportunities to participate in these processes, get some understanding, get some knowledge, get some experience that kind of gives them a better understanding. And I think they would be better suited to, or not better suited, but they would feel they'd have the tools to run for elected office.
All right, Alex, when we come back, we're going to talk more about that and some interesting points that you made about that in the paper. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Alex Anonville here on Addressing the Issue.
Waterloo Regional Police are asking for the public's help in identifying the individual in this photo as they continue to investigate a break and enter at a residence on Activa Avenue in Kitchener. On April 5th at approximately 9:40 p.m., an unknown male attempted to gain entry into a residence by prying at the door. The suspect was confronted by a resident and fled the area. The investigation is ongoing by members of Waterloo Regional Police Service's Break, Enter, and Vehicle Theft Team. Investigators are asking the public to check their home surveillance systems or dash cams for video. Leave a tip with Crime Stoppers in one of three convenient ways: the toll-free number of 1-800-222-TIPS, a secure, anonymous online tip with WaterlooCrimeStoppers.com, or by mobile phone at p3tips.com.
It was John's graduation. We were so proud. We all got together for a picnic. That's when we heard coming from the radio. So we stopped and we listened. It helped us get to safety. That's why when I think of John, because now he has a real future to look forward to.
Welcome to Tapestry Hall Style. I'm Carolina Suarez, and I can't wait to show you the latest in fashion, food, and entertaining.
Tapestry Hall Style, Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. on Rogers TV.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Welcome back to Addressing the Issue. We've got Alex de Nonville here, and again, author of a fantastic research project and paper that was written in 2014, but focuses on the perceptions of politicians of how citizen participation affects city government. There was something that was mentioned there, and I know because I ran for city politics back in 2021, and then I decided not to run anymore. But the question here was that at the end of the day, any politician, be it federal, provincial, or even municipal, deals with the macro. They have to have a wide vision of what is necessary to have a city move. While candidates who run either in neighborhood associations or blocks or special interest are very micro. Do you want to talk about how that actually affects voter apathy? Because it seems to me that if a candidate loses a battle and doesn't get elected, it's more like them taking their ball and going home. And the whole movement falls apart, and then everyone says, well, I see, I couldn't get what I wanted that way, so there's no point making change.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to, I think that's another symptom of kind of one of the problems of kind of democracy where it's at. Certainly, if you're elected as a councillor, you must kind of take into account the bigger picture. I think it's also important to remember that these councillors have had significant amounts of training and education on that macro picture. So to me, it's more that your everyday citizen doesn't necessarily have that experience or knowledge. And I think that's part of the problem. If people don't understand the complexities that local governments are dealing with, that they have to consider, that's part of the problem. It's around civic literacy. So people just don't understand kind of the big picture. But on another note, I think there's an element of how we position ourselves. There's an idea of, what is government there for, especially local government. Local governments don't have parties. It's very much, the work that local governments do is very much in your backyard. And I think a lot of people tend to think when they're voting, I'm going to vote for someone who's going to benefit me. It's this transactional relationship of I'm going to vote for this person because they're going to pave my road or because they're going to keep my taxes low. I think we need to think of ways that to get citizens to think in the bigger picture and see how investments in public service, investments in community assets, community facilities, especially for those that are disadvantaged, poorer people, can contribute to the greater good. And I think that's a message that's missing really in a lot of the broader context. So people vote kind of in their individual self-interest, but the work of local government isn't, it's kind of a product of, it's a product of what council decides. But if we could get citizens to think more, if we could educate them and get them to think more broadly about what work is done and how it contributes to the greater good, I think that would be useful.
All right. So then this leads to the conversation of that maybe one of the reasons why there's voter apathy or low voter turnout is because the media turns it off. So in the case of where you have a city politician who's looking at the macro, who has to do the job for the benefit of everybody in that city, the media comes around and focuses on their foibles or their mistakes and puts out a very false assumption. Do you agree with that assessment that I'm putting forward? Because first of all, I'm in media right now, but the question is, you can see with things that have gone on with federal, provincial, and now in municipal, it seems that every time a piece is written that's against the grain, it actually turns off more people.
I think there is a question around negativity in politics. I think that leads people away or pushes people away when there's negativity. I can't blame the media. I wouldn't blame the media. I'm a recovering journalist myself. I worked in a weekly paper out west. I think it's more of a symptom of, we've had a fracturing of the media landscape. So people are getting their information from different sources. There's a rise of misinformation, disinformation, partisan information that's kind of acting like objective news when it's absolutely not. But there's also cuts to actual media capacity, local journalistic capacity. So cuts to newspapers and other media outlets. If reporters don't have time to do in-depth, objective analysis and have to focus on kind of what is the conflict of the day, I think that's just a product. I think quote unquote negative news is just a product. I think local governments in particular are well served to have well-resourced, well-funded local media because those are the ones that are going to ask the tough questions and keep elected leaders and local governments in general in check and keep them honest and ask tough questions. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than just they're telling negative stories. I think we need those in some cases, but they also need to have the resources to tell the bigger picture stories. Again, we've touched on that before. I think that's lacking in the media landscape, especially at the local level.
All right. Well, Alex, this is a distinct pleasure. We have about a minute left. Is there anything else that you want to share with the viewership right now in regards to voter apathy, low voter turnout, that maybe we can bring you back on another episode and talk more about how to really tackle this issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. I understand why people are frustrated. I understand why people check out. I've got a 1-month-old at home, and she's almost 3 years old, and I certainly do not have the time to attend an open house or attend a public meeting after hours. It's just a no-go. So if anyone in local government's listening, I would say, as much as possible, try to remove the barriers to participation, give people different channels, different options to weigh in. And to other individuals, I'd say seek out people that are sharing information. In Windsor, we have a lot of great independent news sources. Addressing the issue in Brantford's a great example. Kind of digging in, going straight to the people who have experience with the topics at hand. Support those, watch those shows, and support them where you can. So I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a great chat.
Alex de Donville, author of Brantford City Councillors' Perceptions of Citizen Participation, published in 2014 by the Wilfrid Laurier Press. I want to thank you again for being a fantastic guest, our first guest. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much to you, the viewer. I hope you've enjoyed addressing the issue. This has been a fantastic episode, and we are going to follow up with a second episode next week, where we have the second part of our arc regarding voter turnout and the media. And we will have with us some guests to discuss that topic. So until then, I wish you a great evening and stay safe.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Enjoy watching the best of the best in disc golf. This Victoria Day weekend is the 4th annual Foxwood Open Disc Golf Tournament. The Foxwood Open is a PDGA A-tier tournament and a qualifying event for the United States Disc Golf Championship and the Throw Pink Women's Disc Golf Championship. Spectators can watch at the Foxwood Golf and Country Club, 277 Erbs Road in Baden. Visit foxwoodopen.com.
It was my daughter's birthday. She was blowing out the candles on our cake when we heard coming from the TV.